Okay, so there's a shocking number of celebrities who have been involved in serious controversies that seem to no longer really get talked about. And no, it's not because they're innocent, it's because being famous has a way of protecting people. Alright, so in 1992, Mike Tyson was convicted of a rape and he was sentenced to prison. And he actually ended up serving multiple years in prison. Like, this wasn't an allegation or just like a little rumor. Like, he literally got convicted and went to prison. But the most interesting thing is how the public reacted to this. So at the time, Mike Tyson's public image was already chaos, violence, and self-destruction. When the conviction happened, it kind of already fit into his existing caricature. So part of why this didn't really shock anybody was because Mike Tyson was already framed as somebody who was quite chaotic. You know, he was a monster. So rather than disrupting his public image, it reinforced it, meaning at that very time in history it was a good thing for him. But monsters that don't get cast out eventually stop being feared and start being accepted. And so coverage switched from his convictions to his childhood, his demons he's fighting, his addictions. And as time passed, the conviction didn't disappear. It just stopped being the first thing that people mentioned. And as new audiences found him through memes and highlights and interviews, the truth kind of became more diluted. And naturally, people are drawn to redemption stories. So Mike Tyson's later self-awareness and openness about his flaws kind of created a sense of closure for the audience, even without directly addressing the conviction itself. And so over time, Tyson stopped being treated like a person with a record and started being treated like a cultural figure. Like, he was a character, he was a meme, and it's way easier to not judge somebody when they're kind of abstract like that. This kind of excusing doesn't work for everyone. It worked for Tyson because he was already infamous. He was seen as the monster before and he remained the monster after. So the conviction didn't disrupt his image. In people's minds, it just felt consistent. So what this shows is that excusing doesn't always look like denial. Sometimes it looks like acceptance. When someone's image already includes chaos, violence, and controversy, serious things don't stand out. They kind of blend in. And once something blends in, people stop caring about it as much. But it's not every case that gets absorbed this way. In 2009, Chris Brown was arrested and later pleaded guilty to felony assault. The details were public, documented, and widely reported, so unlike cases that fade quietly, this one sparked active defense. And fans didn't just ignore it, they actually argued on behalf of Chris Brown. And one of the most common defenses was separation, like the idea that the music could be enjoyed without engaging with the person behind it. But the thing is, that argument doesn't deny what happened, it just moves the truth somewhere more convenient. And that defense wasn't just happening online, industry support continued too, which quietly signaled that consequences were negotiable. And that's because for a lot of fans, Chris Brown wasn't just an artist, he was part of their identity, so criticism of him almost felt personal. So that's why the focus was shifted away from the act itself and more into questioning motives, or framing it as a mutual or minimizing it as a private issue, and caring less about the fact that he was literally charged with assault on a woman. So what makes this different from simply excusing someone's behavior is that defense requires effort. You know, it's not passive. It asks people to actively reinterpret harm so they can engage without feeling discomfort, basically. You might know this as victim blaming. And this kind of defense only works when people feel invested, but sometimes the reaction isn't defense or excuse, it's denial. Okay, so Andrew Tate's a former kickboxer. He's now an influencer, but he became extremely popular by promoting an extreme version of masculinity online. Though in recent years, he's been arrested and investigated in connection with serious allegations, which are still ongoing. And what's striking about this case is that the allegations didn't end his influence. And in many cases, they coincided with his largest growth. For a lot of supporters, backing Tate kind of became a statement. Supporting him was almost framed as some sort of defiance. So despite the seriousness of the allegations, Tate continued to be framed by followers as a role model, someone to learn from, emulate, and now even defend. So instead of disengaging, many supporters minimized the situation, calling it exaggerated, fabricated, or irrelevant to his message. And they were calling it a plot to take down true speakers, so to say. Like, for some reason, they just couldn't fathom that the guy who talks so poorly about women would be mistreating women. And this is what separates denial from ignorance, because the information is available, it's just being set aside. So when admiration becomes more important than the facts of the matter, I think the line between influence and harmfulness starts to blur a bit. What these cases show is that accountability doesn't disappear the same way every time. Sometimes it gets absorbed, sometimes it gets defended, sometimes it just gets flat out ignored. And from the cases shown here is that once influence becomes more valuable than accountability, the system doesn't correct itself, it simply adapts.